Where does folklore end and religion, superstition, or magic begin? At the first meeting of the Lantern Society, I put that question to a room full of people and gave them a deceptively simple task. Sort a series of familiar customs into categories: a horseshoe over a door, salt thrown over the shoulder, a candle lit for someone who is ill, a family Bible, a bird striking a window, planting by the moon. By the end of the evening, almost nothing stayed in only one place. And that became the real discovery. The categories might be neat, but living tradition isn't. Hi, I'm Jen, the owner of Cozy and Content. I'm here to talk about the first gathering of the Lantern Society, a monthly investigation into folklore, magic, divination, spirits, and the traditions that survive in ordinary life. This video is mainly a summary of the evening and a way to keep track of our meetings and the information we uncover. The evening wasn't a lecture, but I did bring historical sources, some interesting objects, and a set of questions. The attendees, who I will keep anonymous, brought family memories, religious backgrounds, and different ideas. By the end of the night, I noticed a few things. For the most part, everyone who attended agreed on most of the topics that came up. We had people from a variety of backgrounds, and each person brought ideas and information to the table that I personally wouldn't have known otherwise. And I think most importantly, we all felt comfortable enough to talk and ask questions about things that can often be viewed in a negative light. That meant a lot to me, that people had a place to feel comfortable. We began with 3 headings: folklore, religion, and magic. Then we tested them with actual practices. A horseshoe over a doorway looked like folklore because it was an inherited custom, but it also carried a protective purpose, which moved it toward magic. Spilled salt belonged to folklore as a widely repeated superstition, but throwing it over the left shoulder is also a deliberate corrective act. A candle could be a household gesture, a formal religious observance, or a focused act of intention. The same action changed category according to who performed it, why, and what authority gave it meaning. The group kept returning to one useful distinction. A belief is not the same thing as a practice. Someone may not literally believe that putting a purse on the floor will make money leave, yet still avoid doing it because a parent or a grandparent repeated the warning for years. Custom can survive after its explanation has disappeared. In that case, repetition becomes the vehicle that carries the folklore. My favorite part of the evening was not in any book. Everyone was asked to write down sayings, warnings, remedies, weather signs, funeral customs, or anything a family treated as simply true. I think at first it was a little hard to think of specific sayings because often those sayings are as natural to think of as someone's name. You grow up hearing them until they're a part of you. But as we talked, those memories came flooding out with interesting superstitions and sayings. Some of those memories included never putting a purse on the floor, or carrying bread, a coin, and a new broom into a new home, putting money in a wallet before giving it as a gift, and also family phrases spoken over a child who had been hurt. Some people recognized and remembered traditions rooted in Appalachia. Others recognized German, Polish, Czech, or other European customs that had survived migration even after the family stopped naming them as such. One person said that growing up, these things were not called folklore or superstition. They were simply reality. That may be the most important statement of the entire meeting. Folklore is often easiest to see from the outside. Inside the family, it may look as ordinary as the soap everyone uses or the way a grandmother responds when a child falls down. The exercise also exposed loss. Several people realized that older generations had abandoned languages and customs in order to become more recognizably American. What survives can be fragmentary, a phrase whose words are no longer fully understood, a Christmas custom without its country of origin, or a rule that remains after its story is gone. Recording those fragments matters because living folklore is not only found in old collections, it still passes through households now. For the second part of the investigation, I arranged a table as though we had entered an abandoned Appalachian cabin and found the possessions of someone who had died. There were old books, iron, a tarot deck, herbs, a family Bible, an almanac, protective objects, and ordinary household materials. The question was not, was this person a witch? The question was, what can objects actually tell us, and how quickly do we impose a story on them? A shelf of books might suggest education or relative wealth because books were once expensive possessions. A family Bible might look like unquestionable authority, yet handwritten births, deaths, and relationships inside it can preserve both history and deliberate silence. In my own family Bible, later research revealed that part of the recorded family story could not literally be correct. The book was still valuable, but it was not neutral. It carried what the family had decided could be said. That gives an object two lives. It has a material history, when it was made, used, repaired, or passed down, and a narrative history, what people said it meant. The two do not always agree. An investigation becomes stronger when we keep both in view instead of forcing the object to prove the story we want. Context also matters. A deck of cards found beside an almanac and a Bible may look mysterious to us, but it may have been completely ordinary to its owner. A bundle of herbs could have been medicine, seasoning, household fumigation, or protection. An iron spike could be scrap, a tool, a keepsake from the railroad, or a boundary object. The longest debate centered on a railroad spike. Iron has a vast history in protective folklore, especially at doors, hearths, cradles, and other boundaries. But the group moved past the familiar claim and asked a harder question. If someone placed an iron object at a threshold for protection, then died, and the next owner never knew why it was there, would it still protect the house? And there were several answers. Maybe iron works because the material itself carries old associations and physical properties. Maybe the protection depends on belief. Maybe Stormy is interested in joining the conversation. Maybe the original maker's intention remains in the object, or maybe continued attention, like remembering, tending, or renewing the act, is what keeps it alive. A handmade baby blanket became the comparison. If it was made with care for one child and later passed to another, does the care travel with it? The conversation then turned to used and inherited objects. People often worry more readily about negative residue than positive care, and that imbalance is revealing. Ghost stories train us to imagine cursed antiques, while the ordinary objects made lovingly for generations receive less dramatic attention. Obviously, that doesn't make for a good movie. We didn't settle the question, and I don't think we need to. The unresolved question is better. Does power belong to the material, the maker, the user, the story, or the relationship among all four? It's important to separate documented folklore from scientific claims. Iron is an element and can be magnetized. That does not scientifically demonstrate spiritual protection. The protective meaning belongs to cultural practice and belief. Treating those as different kinds of knowledge does not diminish the folklore. It makes the account more accurate. Stormy, I have to get up. A tarot card, a family Bible, and an old farmer's almanac look like very different sources of authority, but placing them together produced one of the evening's strongest comparisons. Tarot itself began in 15th century Europe as a card game. Its strong association with divination and occult practice developed much later. That history matters because objects do not carry one fixed meaning forever. The Bible offered institutional and family authority at once. It could be sacred text, a magical source through the use of psalms, a place to press funeral flowers, and a household archive whose handwritten record might contain error or concealment. Then there was the almanac. Its pages combined weather, agriculture, astronomy, zodiac signs, the man of signs, seasonal timing, and practical advice. To a modern eye, some pages can resemble a magical calendar. Yet in many households, planting by signs or consulting the almanac sat comfortably beside regular church attendance. The contradiction only appears if we insist that people kept these systems separate. Historically, many didn't. The final table included an herb bundle, perforated stones often called hagstones, beeswax, and other household materials associated with protection or purification. These objects are visually compelling, but they also showed why a public summary needs more discipline than a live conversation. Because in a group, people think aloud. They remember partial facts or they test explanations, and they make connections that may or may not hold up. For example, beeswax has a rich practical and symbolic history because it comes from the hive, high stormy. It gives clean light and has long served churches and households. Claims that a burning candle measurably cleanses a room through special ionic effects require evidence, and you really can't repeat it as settled fact unless it's proven. And that, I think, is part of the Lantern Society's work, preserving what people believe and practice while making a clear distinction between documented custom, personal experience, speculation, and scientific evidence. Because those distinctions can exist in the same account. We might document that a household burned a particular plant. We can record that the family understood the smoke is protective. We can note that someone felt personally calmer afterwards, and we can still decline to claim that the smoke removed a measurable external force. Careful wording protects both the history and the audience. It allows belief to be described honestly without turning every remembered explanation into either laboratory fact or foolishness. When we return to the original sorting exercise, nearly every custom had migrated towards the center. A death dream could be read literally, symbolically, or through a family rule that reverses death into birth, marriage, or long life. Burning cedar or juniper could be practical fumigation, religious incense, household cleansing, or an intentional protective act. So the evening didn't really produce a final chart. It produced something better. Ask where a practice came from. Ask who taught it. Ask what the person believed when they were doing it. Ask what changed when the practice crossed a region, language, religion, or generation. And ask which parts are documented and which parts belong to one family or one person. The group also showed why folklore must be collected through conversation. Books preserve patterns, but people reveal how those patterns are lived, altered, forgotten, defended, and carried forward. The archive is not only on a library shelf. It is in the sentence someone suddenly remembers hearing all their life. If you want to continue this investigation, begin with the Frank C. Brown collection of North Carolina folklore, especially volumes 6 and 7 on popular beliefs and superstitions. The Foxfire books are valuable for understanding tradition in lived context through interviews and practical knowledge. And historical almanacs can be read free through the Library of Congress and the Internet Archive. For tarot history, look for museum scholarship on the 15th century card game before moving into later occult interpretation. The first investigation began with a question about boundaries and ended with a question about inheritance. What do we keep doing after we forget why? That is where the Lantern Society will continue. Among the books, objects, stories, and ordinary practices that refuse to fit into only one category. Pumpkin wants you to know that our second investigation about crossroads, spirits, and liminal spaces is going to take place on Thursday, September 3rd. We'll see you then.